My father passed away. After completing all the arrangements, the funeral was ready, but my husband didn't show up.
He was always in dirty work clothes, doing bottom-rung jobs. It's wasted doing it because there won't be inheritance anyway.
I was speechless. I had run out of patience with him, so it was a clean break for me. After the funeral, when I brought up divorce, he eagerly agreed as if he had been waiting for it. As he was filling out the divorce papers, he smirked and said to me,
"Divorce is fine, but you're the one who's going to have trouble, right?"
"I'm not troubled at all. Probably you are the one who will have trouble. My name is Emily Johnson. I have been working as a clerk since I joined a construction company after graduating from college. I'm getting old enough to be in my early 30s. I am married, but we don't have children. My husband, David, is a natural-born playboy, never running out of stories about gambling machines, horse racing, boat racing, drinking, smoking, and womanizing. There was a time when we tried to have children together, but it got interrupted for a reason and never resumed. I never pressed him, but the reason for the interruption was that my husband had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. Since I haven't had sexual relations with anyone other than my husband after getting married, I had to assume the infection came from his cheating. When I confronted David about it, he said, "I've forgotten about it. It's nothing." He insisted on "forget it, don't ask," and I couldn't persuade him to cut back on his womanizing. His bad drinking habits and poor conduct began to stand out more, and my affection for him started to wear thin. One winter while I was married, my father died. Despite my repeated warnings, he wasn't in great health, but since he had no hobbies other than work, he worked all year round. He collapsed at work and was hospitalized, and his condition rapidly worsened until he died at the young age of 58. My father was a sole proprietor. He worked as an independent business owner. He was a diligent man with the skill and knowledge to handle every aspect of a certain field in construction work on his own. Even when the company he contracted with told him to take a day off, he would show up the next day, surprising the younger employees. My mother is not around. It seems that my mother left my father and me because she could not keep up with my father's hard-working personality. That was when I was 4 years old. My father was well regarded for his reliability as a craftsman, thanks to his meticulous care and skill. After my father passed away in the hospital, I started arranging the funeral, and many people who had worked with my father sent telegrams of condolence or called. I was grateful, but dealing with it all was overwhelming, and I made little progress in meeting with the priest. With hardly any time to go home, I spent my days beside my father, who lay on a coffin in a room at the venue. My uncle Tom lived nearby and said I could take a break at his place, but I wanted to stay close to my father. However, from the time I started making funeral arrangements, I repeatedly tried to contact David. No return calls, no replies to messages. He was probably busy with gambling or something. It definitely wasn't work. On the day of the funeral, I respectfully greeted friends, relatives, and professional acquaintances who attended, along with my father's siblings. Some were even clients of the company I work for. He had a wonderful daughter. "Your father must have been very proud," they said kindly, which made me feel humbled. Even after everything was over, I tried contacting my husband again, but still no response.
Emily, you need to think about what you're doing with your life. It's looking pretty bleak if you keep on this way. You know it better than anyone. We're worried about you instead of your father.
Tom's words made me reflect on recent events. Unanswered calls, worthless hobbies, cold attitudes. How could I have been so mistaken to stay with such a person? My tears fell in combination with despair, regret, and exhaustion. While comforting me, Tom said he would be there to support me. On my way home, I stopped by the grocery store to buy some whiskey, my father's favorite. I thought about my future while drinking it. I was surprised when I got home. David was at home. He was drunk out of his mind. He was sprawled out on the living room sofa and asleep. Countless empty beer cans and snack wrappers were scattered all over the coffee table. "What are you doing?" I had to ask, overwhelmed by the smell of alcohol.
Oh, you're back. Hey, make me a whiskey and water. I'm sick of beer.
David tried to grab a new bottle from the fridge, but realizing there was no ice, he slammed the door shut and looked at me again.
Oh, look at that. You bought some booze. Hand it over. Don't just stand there.
He reached for the grocery bag I was holding, trying to take out the whiskey my father loved. I instinctively slapped his hand away.
Ouch!
A clear slapping sound confirmed I hit him hard. His already red face from being drunk turned even redder with anger as he glared at me. "Stop it, don't touch me."
Hey, that hurt. What's the big idea all of a sudden?
The atmosphere was charged with tension. Feeling like there was no turning back, I somehow found the words smoothly. "I called you so many times to tell you my father died. Why didn't you come to his funeral?"
Your father doesn't matter.
I couldn't believe my ears. He was, after all, somewhat involved in work related to my father. A little respect would have been appropriate. After all, he was family, even if by marriage.
We only met a couple of times, right? I didn't feel close to him. You didn't actually go through with the funeral, did you?
Of course I did.
You're an idiot. Instead of wasting money on a priest, you should have given it to me. How much did you pay?
I suddenly felt sad. Most of the funeral expenses were covered by my uncles. I only paid a small portion. There was some savings and inheritance that could have covered it. My uncles insisted on paying, saying, "You'll surely need it in the future." How could I tell you how much? It wasn't even that expensive. It wasn't very expensive. I wish I could have given him a better send-off.
What do you mean you can tell your husband? Don't mess with me. I didn't approve any expensive expenses. Give it to me.
Husband, are you kidding me that your wife's father died and you didn't even attend his funeral? And then you abused her and called him my husband.
All that savings, that's all money I earned. You paid the funeral expenses without my consent. I'll say it as many times as necessary. Don't mess with me. If you're my wife, show some respect to your husband.
If that's how it is, then you not attending my father's funeral means you're not family. I can't say he's my partner. If you cared about me even a little, if you loved me, you would have shown some kindness to someone important to me. Let's get divorced. I said it clearly, trying to stay calm.
I'd been wanting to ask you myself. Thinking I left the house in the care of someone like you gives me chills. You've probably been skimming money off little by little. Joking around. I'll give you your divorce as much as you want. Get the divorce papers now. You're the one who's going to have trouble. Your dad, always in his filthy work clothes, doing bottom-rung jobs, must be crying too. His daughter can't even appreciate who was providing for her. You've never thanked your dad, have you? I'm not going to be troubled at all. It's you who will have trouble. I've been taking care of you all this time. You were able to live because of me. Regret it? There's no inheritance, couldn't be, and I won't care even if you do regret.
Ignoring my husband's loud voice, I quickly packed my bags. Taking only what I needed, I left the house with my minimal belongings.
Scream all you want.
He followed me to the entrance, hurling insults at my back. I couldn't stop the tears. I stayed at a budget hotel near the station. The male receptionist was polite but gave me a puzzled look at my tear-streaked face and disheveled appearance. I probably looked that bad. All because of my husband. I endured unwarranted yelling. As I entered the elevator with the key, I tried to think about the future calmly. But the image of my husband ranting kept interrupting my thoughts, making it impossible to focus. Frustrated, I couldn't sleep. Unable to sleep, I opened my laptop and looked for a good lawyer, finding that a downloadable divorce form was available. I immediately downloaded it on my phone and printed it at a nearby convenience store. Some local governments might not accept the downloadable form, but the nearest City Hall's website did not provide such information. I immediately filled it out and slammed it into the house's mailbox, where my husband was waiting. Then I was exhausted and slept in a hotel bed. The next day, after finishing some errands at work and taking an early leave, I rushed to the lawyer's office. After learning about the procedures and necessary documents, I started preparing. I sent a message to my husband saying I would come to pick up the divorce papers at tonight. He didn't reply, but it was read. I prepared myself for the confrontation. I visited the house during the time my husband was likely to be home, but he wasn't there. It was past 8 o'clock at night. Normally, he would be home by now. I waited. There was plenty to do while waiting. I planned to gather my belongings from inside the house. I gave up on the furniture. I didn't have the energy to move big items. Surprisingly, many of my valuables were missing. Watches, luxury items were gone. Not everything, but noticeably less. Clothes and books were also scarce. My husband had thrown them out. I was tired of crying and being sad. I gathered what was left of my belongings. It only amounted to enough to fit in my large backpack. I took photos of the reduced valuables, the closet, and the sparsely filled bookshelf, and sent them to the lawyer I had hired. My husband returned home after 11 p.m.
Hey, there's a thief breaking in. Someone's quietly stealing money. Give back the key, you thief.
It seemed he had been out drinking. His face was flushed, and he looked greasy. And there was even the scent of a perfume that's been popular among young women lately. It wasn't the scent of the perfume my husband usually wore. Just that was enough for me to guess where he had been. Did you throw away my stuff?
Well, I just took back what was stolen. Here, take it, the divorce papers.
I'll sue you for defamation against me and my father.
Do whatever you want. I couldn't care less. I did you a favor by marrying a gloomy office worker like you, a late bloomer with a bad personality. You're the one who's going to have trouble after we split. This is hilarious. You are suing me?
You're the one who's going to have trouble. I won't be troubled at all. I slammed the house keys on the table and left. Then, I really started preparing to sue him. I had the funds, the inheritance. I really didn't want to spend money on this. But there was no choice now. The lawyer was sympathetic. He said it was good that I took photos of where my belongings had gone missing. Things moved smoothly from there. My husband apparently believed I had no inheritance and would be financially troubled. The amount claimed from him for defamation, lack of emotional support as a husband, and for the disposed belongings turned out to be substantial. A sum that meant he'd mostly be stuck with cheap liquor for the rest of his life. Shocked by the number of zeros in the claim, he finally apologized properly.
I'm truly sorry. I apologize.
He kept apologizing, but I wasn't in the mood to concede. I thought I should have done this much earlier. The lawyer was about to wrap up. Following our meeting's agenda, he moved to a business-like explanation after the apology. Then, it was all up to the lawyer. I had several fitting phrases in mind as my final words, but only one seemed right for the occasion. I told you so. You're the one who's going to have trouble. With that, I glanced at my husband, who hung his head deeply. The lawyer continued in a steady tone about what would happen next. During this time, my husband didn't raise his face at all. Despite the lawyer repeatedly asking, "Are you listening? Do you understand?" my husband could only weakly respond, "Yes." After that, I reported the divorce to my father's grave and informed my uncles.
So, it turned out for the best, huh? Are you settled now?
Yes, I'm taking it easy now. Work isn't too busy, so I'm not too tired.
Let's all go out for a meal sometime. We'll talk a lot then.
Yes, let's do that. My uncles were very kind. People at work also seemed to have considered my turbulent personal life since my father's passing, not assigning me complex tasks. As promised, I went out for meals with my uncles, enjoying happier days, until I received a call. The call was from my ex-husband.
Sorry to bother you, but could you wait a bit for the monthly payments? Life's been tough lately.
3 messages with similar content were sent to my phone. Something happened.
No, recently, my work just dropped off. The pay isn't great, jobs aren't going well, and people seem colder somehow.
A month later, he informed me he had been laid off.
Regarding the payments,
Similar messages were being sent. I only marked them as read, and after hearing from my lawyer about the consequences of failing to meet payment obligations, I forwarded his response directly to my ex-husband. There was a reason why my ex-husband had suddenly fallen so far. I knew what it was. It was because he didn't attend my father's funeral. My father had worked in the construction industry for many years, handling most of his jobs alone. This led to various connections, which had been beneficial. Of course, I knew that my ex-husband's clients, supervisors, company presidents, and requesting companies were acquainted with my father. They must have reconsidered their opinion of my absent ex-husband after seeing me greet everyone properly at the funeral. My uncle was also well regarded in the industry. When I was told he had become unemployed and wanted to discuss the future, I agreed to meet on the condition that I choose the place. My ex-husband looked poor and nothing like his former self when we met. He didn't seem to have been drinking. When I was told he had become unemployed and wanted to discuss the future, I agreed to meet on the condition that I choose the place. My ex-husband looked poor and nothing like his former self when we met. He didn't seem to have been drinking. We met in a cafe next to a police station, and I chose a corner seat. My ex-husband requested an extension on the payments from start to finish. Yet, looking at him now, I realized my father had left me an inheritance worth more than money, for which I truly had to be grateful. I would cover this payment. A cup of coffee can be considered a parting gift. So, I decided to make a return for that time. Standing up, I said kindly, "I'll cover this," looking down at my ex-husband with plenty of room to spare. He smirked. Cutting off whatever he was about to say, I leaned in close. "Scream all you want." I left the cafe briskly. The wind felt good. I thought it wasn't necessary to choose a place near a police station. As I passed by, a boy and a girl with backpacks walked by the police station. I sincerely wished I could show my Father in heaven what his grandchildren would look like. Maybe it's time to give matchmaking a try.